Hi guys, I'm Danielle Applestone and I'm CEO of a business that is newly formed. We formed it in the summer and it's called Other Machine Co. And we build, it's funny, I can actually say like desktop milling machines to a crowd and they know what it means. So if you don't, just, we build 3D objects, our machine builds 3D objects, but by cutting away layers rather than depositing layers. And it's been a crazy experience trying to form this company, and I think that like everything that everyone's talked about so far has been extremely relevant, and I think that I have a lot of overlap with the Espen in terms of why I think that 3D printing is important and 3D fabrication technology in general. I just wanted to play this little video of our machine. So this is Sam that you saw there, and it's 35-second machine video of assembling it. And when you say like hardware is hard, there's a lot of components that go into such a simple machine. And Sam's background is in art. He used to build like big art sculptures for a semi-famous artist in town here. And it like just the sheer number of things that you must do and you must get right. And especially our machine is supposed to be a high precision machine. There's Jake. That's our intern, Jake. It's pretty incredible. And I think that, like, one of the reasons that people say hardware is hard is because we're just not really familiar with that. Like, there's a lot of things that go into making a software program, right? You have to have all of the right drivers and plugins and this language that you use for this, and just like making a website is like 8 different things, And so I think that it's not necessarily that hardware is hard, is that we haven't been trained to do what we're supposed to do with hardware. And I find it fascinating. We have a software and a hardware component, and it's true, those things are intimately linked if you want a good user experience. I'll play you just a tiny demo of what I mean by, an integrated software and hardware experience. So our software, the premise is that everything that you see on a screen is what happens in real life. And this happens to be cutting a circuit board. And it'll show you on the screen, there's this computer rendering of the file that's being cut, and in like 2 seconds, it pops up on the board. So you see there's a machine, I'll pause. There's the machine moving in the back, which is like your real life experience. And that's what it looks like when it's cutting a board. And there it is on the screen. And the idea is to reduce the number of steps. So if you are a person who designs boards like an Eagle or something, you can drag in a board. We do the motion planning for you. You have a machine that is doing the same thing as it's doing on your computer. And I think that really it enables a lot more people to use this kind of technology, which for me is really important. It's all about access. One of the things that was also really important for us is to make parts out of materials that are typically hard to cut. I'll show you 2 seconds of it cutting aluminum. So this is one of my favorite videos, actually. It's the first piece of aluminum that we cut, so it's kind of special. And it's cutting a little gear for a drone that our intern made. And I think that this machine costs, we're trying to sell it at like $1,600, but that didn't used to be possible. To make a machine that can do both cutting of aluminum and high precision circuits for a low cost. And the reason is everybody's working on this now. There's lots of components out there. There's a motor controller board. We use the Tiny G board. That is really low cost. And I just think that I'm just personally really excited that that exists now. And that leads me to the whole topic of what I really want to talk about, which is this is a 3D printing talk. So let's talk about why we love 3D printing so much. Did it work? Yes, it did. Okay. So I have a few ideas about why 3D printing is so loved. And I was talking to my friend Dan, who simultaneously lives on a farm and makes stuff by hand and then also teaches at RISD. So he's super weird perspective on things. And when I asked him, I was like, well, why do you think 3D printing is so loved? And he was like, because it makes you into a superhero. I'm just like, what are you talking about? And he's like, okay, there's 3 ways you can become a superhero. One, you get struck by lightning or you're exposed to like a huge amount of radiation. 2, you're just from outer space. You do things that we can't do. And 3 is you acquire a piece of technology that nobody else has and you become a god. Like you can do things that nobody else can do. And it's like kind of ridiculous, but that really struck me as like, oh, it's the 3rd one. That's like what 3D printing is. And it's this promise that like you can make anything that you want. Like you don't have to, one of the big things I think about is ask for permission. Like you don't have to ask permission to print a gun if you want. You don't have to ask permission to make gears for your stuff. You can print circuits for your sensors or, like if you want to embed sensors in something. And I think the permission is a really big one. Like we're very used to asking for permission, and I think that 3D fabrication technology, like access to manufacturing techniques, eliminates that. It's basically your responsibility to decide what you want to do with these tools, which I think is really powerful. And you don't need an industry to provide the tools for you. Hello. Okay. And you don't need to go to a store to buy some of the things that you need. You can make them yourself. And I think there's something powerful like the first time that you see an idea become real. I see it when it happens with kids, but also grown-ups, like grown-ups who are in a certain area, and then it never occurred to them like they could just do this. It's like me, it never occurred to me that I could just go buy a unicycle when I was like 30. But you can just go do this, and now it's like I'm super excited about it. So I think that, it's 3D printing and it's these objects, and oftentimes they're very small and made out of a plastic, but I think what it represents is control, like regaining control over what you do and the objects that are in your life. And not only that, it's like a way to, it represents like control of your destiny in a way. Like I have friends who work at tech shop, and they essentially were working their day jobs, and they had tech shop memberships, and they were like doing it on their side, doing it on the side. And then they got to the point where they're just like, I'm gonna quit my job. I'm gonna regain control of my destiny. I'm gonna quit my job. I have access to these tools. I can start this company. And I think that like in this day and age, that's like about as close to being a superhero as you can be, is like innovating your life with the tools that you are given. And yeah, I think that 3D printing, it sort of represents that, in general. I think it gets people excited. And it leads me to the next thing, which is, why is innovation important? I hear a lot of people talk about innovation and how we're gonna like innovate our way out of economic crisis and out innovate other companies and other countries. And I think a lot of that, I think they're talking about the next big thing, which is like the next big transformational technology, something that changes the world on a grand scale. It's like the big thing that changes everything for everyone. And I kind of disagree with that view of innovation in general, because I think that, like Espen mentioned, it's like, global becomes local at some point, and I think that's really key for innovation. So what I'd like to see instead is community scale innovation. So if you're in a community, you know your friends and your family, and you know what their problems are, and you know how to address those problems in a way that someone from the outside doesn't necessarily know. And I think that you have a perspective on what things would work, what things might not work. And I connect that to 3D printing by saying, okay, well, what if in every community you had the tools to do this community scale innovation? Like, what if there were centers in every community where you could solve each other's problems? Because I do think that for me personally, innovation is it's just about helping people in new ways. It's not about coming up with like the next huge technology that changes the world. It's about affecting the people that are nearest to you. And I would super love to see all of those tools out in the world, which is why I work at the company that I work at. And so I guess the last little bit that I wanted to talk about, because this is a software meetup, is what is the role of a software developer in this hardware movement towards community innovation centers and things like that. And I think that software people actually have one of the biggest jobs in transforming the way we solve problems for our communities. And in this future of community problem-solving heroes, and it's reducing barriers to the following three things. Resources. So if you can be the person who reduces the barrier to resources, and I mean funding, that's reducing the barriers to people, like having access. If you're in the middle of nowhere, it's really hard to get the super fancy software developer in San Francisco, but maybe you could do something else, or we could Skype with them. Things like that I think are hugely useful. Reducing barriers to technology, I think, has a lot to do, for me personally, with user interfaces for machines is what I focus on all of the time. So there's technologies that are out there that are essentially, it's just like a brick. If you don't have the right software to use it, it's not relevant to you. It doesn't do anything for you. And three is information. And a lot of that is as a software engineer, you can definitely increase access to information, eliminate barriers to information, which I think is just hugely important. And I think that if we eliminate barriers, I think naturally we will see more innovation, more people solving problems, taking charge of their own communities and doing that. And this is my kid. So for me, 3D printing, to sort of bring it all together, is about more than just objects. It's about empowering people, obviously, to make changes in their own communities. And it's just the beginning. 3D printing is sort of the first thing that caught everybody's attention, and it's exciting because it makes people, you have more powers than you used to have. And I think that there's mills, there's lathes, there's things which we can envision having a whole suite of tools that are just like people have in industry, but you have access to them. You could walk down the street and go to them. If you live in San Francisco or Oakland or whatever, it's a lot easier. And I really want to push that access out, just radiate it everywhere. Just like having a 3D printer, access to a 3D printer for every kid is pretty amazing. And I feel, that's incredibly exciting. That's sort of the world that we live in. So I guess that's the end of my talk. I guess, yeah, were we going to have questions at the end? Otherwise, people could just ask me questions. I don't really care.
Yeah, we're going to have a panel at the end.
OK, well, then let's just do that. Thank you, guys.